I still remember the exact moment I decided I was going to start my own business. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, surrounded by scattered papers, empty coffee cups, and the faint hum of my laptop. Everything about my life screamed caution. I had a modest job, a small apartment, and bills that never seemed to end. But inside me there was a fire, a vision of something bigger, something I could call my own, something that was mine, created by my hands, fueled by my dreams. I told myself, even if I fail, at least I tried, at least I dared. And then came him. He wasn't a stranger. He was my boss at the time, the person who should have believed in ambition, in talent, in potential. But instead he laughed. He leaned back in his chair, looked at me with that condescending smirk, and said, "That's cute, but it won't work. Stick to what you're good at." I froze. My heart sank, but somewhere beneath that hurt, anger sparked. I could have cried, I could have quit, but something told me I couldn't let him have the last word. "Not now, not ever. I want you to imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a dream. You've poured hours, your soul, and hope into it, and someone you respect, laughs at it. The disbelief in their eyes, the judgment in their voice, it can crush even the strongest. But in that moment, I made a choice. I decided to take that laughter, that mockery, and turn it into fuel. My first days were nothing short of terrifying. I didn't have investors. I didn't have a team. I barely had the money to pay for my website and a handful of materials. I was alone in my little apartment, working late into the night, questioning whether I was really cut out for this. I remember the nights I cried quietly, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. But then I reminded myself of one thing: he doesn't decide my worth. I do. I began to work relentlessly. I read every book I could get my hands on about entrepreneurship, marketing, finance, and leadership. I watched tutorials online, I attended webinars, and networked tirelessly. Every small skill I learned felt like a weapon in my corner. Every new client, every positive email, every tiny sale became a victory I celebrated in silence. But life wasn't just about work. There were people who doubted me, friends who said, "Why risk so much? You have a safe job." Family members who shook their heads, worried about my future. And then there were those who believed in me, quietly and steadfastly. My best friend, who listened to my endless plans at 2 a.m. My mother, who reminded me that perseverance is stronger than fear. My mentors, who encouraged me to keep going, to learn from mistakes, to embrace challenges. These were the voices I clung to when doubt threatened to drown me. And yet, the memory of him never left me. His words echoed in my mind, sometimes whispering, sometimes screaming, "You won't succeed. You can't do this." But every time I felt that sting, I reminded myself that laughter is temporary, success lasts. Every late night, every sacrifice, every fear I faced became a stepping stone toward proving him wrong. Then came the first taste of success. It was small, maybe insignificant to the outside world, my first sale. My first client who genuinely loved my product. I remember the excitement, the disbelief someone believed in me. For the first time, I felt the power of possibility, and I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. He probably never noticed. He probably didn't care, and that's exactly why I was determined to outgrow him, to outshine him, and to create a reality where his laughter would never matter again. Every small victory became a building block. Every late night, every financial struggle, every moment of doubt, I transformed them into lessons, into strength, into determination. I also began to notice a shift in myself. I wasn't the insecure woman who had walked into his office that day, trembling at his judgment. I was stronger, I was smarter, I was fearless. I learned resilience, patience, and the quiet power of persistence. I discovered that the path to success isn't glamorous. It's lonely, exhausting, and filled with moments where you want to give up. But it's also beautiful because every small achievement is yours and yours alone. And yet, as much as I grew, I couldn't shake the anticipation of what was to come. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that the business I was building, small, humble, and imperfect, had the potential to grow beyond imagination. I didn't yet know how big it would become, or what doors it would open, or the people it would inspire. All I knew was that every laugh, every doubt, every sneer from him was a reminder that I had to push harder, aim higher, and dream bigger. So I made a promise to myself: I will succeed. I will build something so extraordinary that no one, not even him, can ignore it. And I will do it on my terms. This was the start. The fire had been lit. The foundation of a billion-dollar brand was quietly taking shape in a tiny apartment, driven by determination, sleepless nights, and the unshakable belief that I was capable of more than anyone could imagine. And so begins my journey, from a small, underestimated businesswoman to the moment where the world would finally recognize the brand I built, brick by brick, dream by dream, and victory by victory. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with new skeptics, obstacles, and heartbreaks. But I had learned the most important lesson. The opinions of others, even those who once mocked you, cannot define your destiny. This was only the beginning. The excitement of starting my business quickly collided with reality. Dreams, no matter how bright, often meet resistance from life, and sometimes from the people who should have been cheering you on. I remember waking up every morning with a mixture of hope and dread. Hope because I was creating something that was mine, and dread because I had no idea if it would survive even the first year. The first challenge was the grind itself. I worked hours that felt endless, often forgetting to eat or rest. I juggled multiple tasks at once: designing products, managing finances, learning marketing, answering customer emails, and figuring out logistics. Some days I felt unstoppable. Other days I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. And then there was him. Even though he wasn't actively present in my life anymore, his voice haunted me. "It won't work. You're wasting your time." Every time a shipment was delayed or a client complained, his words echoed in my mind. But I had learned by now not to let him break me. Instead, I used his doubt as fuel. Every problem became a challenge I was determined to overcome. Every failure became a lesson that made me stronger. Financial struggle was constant. There were months when I barely made enough to pay for materials, let alone rent or bills. I remember sitting at my desk late at night, staring at the numbers, wondering how I would survive. But giving up was never an option. I reminded myself, if I can survive this, I can survive anything. Slowly, painstakingly, I learned how to budget, negotiate, and reinvest every penny into my business. Mistakes were inevitable. Early marketing campaigns failed. Products I was proud of didn't sell. I lost clients. I faced rejection after rejection, but each setback taught me something invaluable: resilience, creativity, and the importance of listening to my customers. I discovered that failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Even in the darkest moments, I found unexpected support. Friends and mentors became my lifeline. I remember a mentor telling me one evening, "You're not failing. You're learning faster than most, and that's why you'll succeed." Those words became my mantra. Every day, I reminded myself that this was a journey, not a sprint. Amidst all this, there were small victories that kept me going. The first time a client complimented my work, I felt a thrill that no amount of money could match. The first time a product sold out, I stayed awake all night celebrating quietly. Every positive review, every return customer, every milestone was proof that I was moving forward, proof that I was capable of more than he ever imagined. And yet the journey was lonely. There were nights when doubt crept in, whispering that I wasn't good enough. I questioned my decisions, my abilities, and even my sanity, but I had learned to fight back. I reminded myself that I didn't need anyone's approval, not his, not anyone else's. What mattered was my belief in myself, my vision, and my perseverance. Marketing my brand became another battle. Social media was overwhelming, advertising costs were high, and every misstep could cost me credibility. I experimented constantly, sometimes failing spectacularly, sometimes succeeding beyond my expectations. But every step, whether forward or backward, taught me to adapt, to innovate, and to stay committed. During this time, I also began to grow into a leader. I realized that my business wasn't just about me. It was about the people I served, the employees I hired, and the community I built. I learned how to motivate, inspire, and empower those around me. Leadership was not something I was born with. It was something I earned day by day, decision by decision, challenge by challenge. And through all of this, his laughter, the one that had stung me at the very beginning, began to feel smaller. It no longer had power over me. It became a distant memory, a reminder of why I was fighting, but no longer a force that could control my emotions. Every product I sold, every milestone I achieved, every positive review became a silent victory over him. By the end of part 2, my small business was starting to take shape. It wasn't yet a brand the world would recognize, but it had a heartbeat, a presence, and a promise of growth. I was learning the art of persistence, the science of strategy, and the power of believing in myself. I had turned ridicule into determination, doubt into motivation, and failure into opportunity. The fire inside me was growing stronger, fueled by every challenge I faced. And though the journey ahead was still long, I could feel it. The business I was building was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a reality, and that reality would one day surpass even my wildest expectations, and yes, even his. After months of sleepless nights, endless trial and error, and countless setbacks, something remarkable happened. My small business, which had once been nothing more than a dream scribbled on the back of a notebook, began to gain attention. The first breakthrough wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was subtle, almost invisible to the outside world, but to me, it felt monumental. It started with a single client referral. One happy customer recommended my services to a friend. That friend became a client. That client mentioned me on social media, and suddenly my little business was being noticed. The ripple effect was unstoppable. For the first time, I realized that persistence, patience, and attention to detail could create a network that was larger than any marketing campaign. And then, as luck and preparation would have it, a local magazine reached out. They wanted to feature my business in their monthly entrepreneurship column. I remember holding that phone, heart racing, hands shaking. This wasn't just publicity, it was validation. It was proof that my work, my effort, and my vision mattered. The article ran, complete with photos, quotes, and a story about a woman defying the odds. Overnight, inquiries increased, orders doubled, and suddenly I was no longer just a small business owner, I was becoming a brand. But with this breakthrough came another layer of challenge. Attention attracts scrutiny. People began asking questions, competitors started taking notice, and there were whispers that I had somehow gotten lucky. The naysayers, those who had dismissed me, started to appear more frequently in my mind. Most importantly, there was him, my former boss, the one who had laughed at my dream. I couldn't help but imagine his reaction if he knew that the tiny idea he mocked was now being featured in publications, being celebrated publicly, and generating real income. It wasn't just external validation that mattered, it was internal proof. I could see that my approach, my vision, and my relentless work ethic were actually producing results. I began to understand the art of scaling a business, creating systems, delegating tasks, and identifying what worked and what didn't. I realized that growing a business wasn't just about effort. It was about strategy, foresight, and learning from every small victory and mistake. Around this time, I also started to gain attention online. Social media was a game changer. Posts about my products, customer testimonials, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of my work began to generate real engagement. People started sharing my story. She started from nothing. She didn't have investors. And now look at her. I watched as my followers grew, as people reached out to collaborate, and as other entrepreneurs began to take notice. Every like, share, and comment was a reminder that I was building more than a business, I was building a movement. Yet, even with this momentum, I never forgot the struggles. I still worked long hours. I still managed every detail. The difference now was that the fire inside me had grown into something fierce and unstoppable. I had learned that success is never instant. It's painstaking. It's full of moments where you want to give up, and yet you keep going. That persistence, that unwillingness to quit, became my defining trait. And then, finally, came a moment that made everything tangible. A major retailer reached out to carry my products in their stores. This was the kind of opportunity I had once only dreamed of. Suddenly, my brand wasn't just local anymore, it was becoming recognized on a much larger scale. I remember walking into the first store carrying my products, imagining customers picking them up, seeing my logo, and feeling proud of what I had created. This was proof that hard work, resilience, and belief in oneself can turn mockery into triumph. And yes, somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought of him, the one who had laughed at my dream. I imagined him hearing about my success, reading about me in magazines, seeing my products on store shelves, and realizing that his doubt was no longer relevant. The laughter that had once stung so sharply now felt distant, powerless, almost absurd. Through this breakthrough, I also learned an essential lesson. Success is not just about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you are capable, resourceful, and unstoppable. Each small win, each milestone, each recognition became a reminder of why I started, why I persevered, and why I refused to give up, even when the world or one particular man said I couldn't. By the end of this phase, my business had shifted. It was no longer a tiny operation struggling to survive. It was a growing brand with recognition, validation, and a trajectory that suggested something much bigger was possible. The foundation for exponential growth was in place, built on countless hours of work, relentless determination, and the courage to keep dreaming, even in the face of ridicule. And this is where the story truly begins to accelerate. The real test wasn't just gaining recognition, it was maintaining momentum, expanding influence, and preparing for the moment when the world would finally see me as I saw myself, a capable, powerful, and unstoppable entrepreneur. The breakthrough had given me momentum, but I knew that small wins alone wouldn't build a legacy. I needed to expand to take my business beyond the limits I had once imagined, to reach customers far beyond my neighborhood, my city, my state. I had learned how to survive, how to grow, and now it was time to scale with purpose. Expansion wasn't easy. It meant long days and even longer nights. It meant new challenges, sourcing better suppliers, negotiating contracts, training a team, and learning how to manage inventory on a much larger scale. Every new store, every online campaign, every shipment was a test of my resolve. There were moments when I thought it might be too much, when the weight of responsibility pressed down on me, and I wondered if I could continue. But each time, I reminded myself why I started. And then came the moment when I realized that my growth was impossible to ignore. Social media followers surged, press mentions multiplied, and suddenly my small brand was being talked about on national platforms. Interviews, podcasts, features in prominent magazines, all of it confirmed that what I had built was no longer a secret. People admired the story of a woman who had started from scratch, faced ridicule, and turned her dreams into reality. And yes, he began to notice. I first heard through mutual acquaintances that he had mentioned my name, almost incredulously. "Did you hear about her business? It's doing really well." I could almost hear the hesitation, the disbelief in his voice. It was a mixture of surprise and regret, the kind of feeling that comes when you realize you underestimated someone. He had mocked me, laughed at my ambitions, and dismissed my ideas, and now he was confronted with undeniable proof that I was not just capable, I was thriving. This awareness was intoxicating in a quiet, controlled way. Not revenge, not arrogance, just the satisfaction of knowing that I had proven my worth through action, not words. I wasn't interested in gloating. I was interested in showing that persistence, vision, and hard work can overcome doubt, mockery, and even the harshest critics. Meanwhile, my business continued to grow exponentially. I opened multiple branches in key cities, hired talented teams, and developed products that people loved. I established partnerships that took my brand further than I had ever dreamed. Every milestone, every record sale, every glowing review was a reminder that I was building something remarkable. And each step I took, I could feel the world beginning to take notice, and yes, he was part of that world now. Interestingly, the more successful I became, the more clear it was that my strength came not from wanting to prove him wrong, but from believing in myself. My drive was never fueled purely by spite. It was fueled by a deeper purpose to create, to innovate, to inspire, and to show others, especially women, that limitations exist only if you let them. I remember one particular moment vividly. A national retailer invited me to speak at a major business conference. Standing on that stage, addressing hundreds of aspiring entrepreneurs, I spoke about my journey, about challenges, late nights, failures and triumphs, and as I shared my story, I realized something powerful. The same lessons that helped me succeed could help countless others. My story wasn't just about me anymore, it was a beacon for anyone who had been laughed at, underestimated, or told they couldn't succeed. And somewhere in the audience of my mind, I imagined him listening. I imagined him reflecting on every time he laughed, every time he dismissed me, every time he underestimated my potential. That laughter had fueled a fire within me, and now the results spoke louder than any words ever could. By now, my brand wasn't just recognized locally or regionally. It was national. People trusted my products. People respected my story. And through every email, every comment, every mention online, I could see the world acknowledging what I had built. It was undeniable, visible, and permanent, but growth comes with new challenges. With expansion came competition. I faced businesses that tried to copy my ideas, investors who wanted control, and industry experts who doubted a woman could sustain such growth. Every challenge demanded creative problem-solving, courage, and the confidence I had been building all along, but I was ready. I had faced mockery, failure, and doubt. I had survived every test, and now I could handle the complexities of scaling a brand. By the end of this chapter, transformation was complete. I was no longer the timid woman who had pitched an idea to a skeptical boss. I was a recognized entrepreneur, a business owner whose success was now public, tangible, and undeniable, and as I continued to expand, innovate, and thrive, the awareness of my growth began to hit him, the man who once dismissed me. He had seen the results, even if silently, and now he had to acknowledge them, not because I demanded it, not because I needed him to, but because the reality was inescapable. I had succeeded where he said I couldn't. This was the point where everything shifted. The ridicule that had once fueled me became irrelevant. The doubt that had once haunted me became motivation. And the recognition, both public and private, solidified the truth. My brand, my vision, and my work were unstoppable. And that set the stage for the next chapter, going global, dominating the industry, and finally achieving the $1 billion milestone that would silence any lingering disbelief, including his. By the time I had established a national presence, I realized something crucial. Staying small was no longer an option. My brand had the potential to go beyond borders, to reach customers around the world, and to make a meaningful impact on a global scale. It was time to think bigger, act bolder, and step into uncharted territory. Expanding internationally was both thrilling and terrifying. I was entering markets I barely understood, facing regulations, cultural differences, and competitors who were seasoned and experienced. The stakes were higher than ever. A single misstep could cost me years of hard work. But I reminded myself, growth never comes from comfort zones. If I wanted to turn my dream into a legacy, I had to embrace risk, strategy, and innovation. I started by researching markets meticulously. I learned about consumer behaviors, preferences, and trends in different countries. I reached out to international distributors, built strategic partnerships, and assembled a team capable of managing operations across continents. Every decision was calculated, every step deliberate. The lessons I had learned from starting small. Resilience, attention to detail, adaptability became my guiding principles on this much larger stage. And then, something remarkable happened. The world responded. Orders started coming in from across the globe. International media began featuring my story. Influencers and entrepreneurs reached out to collaborate. People from different continents speaking different languages were engaging with my brand and resonating with my journey. It was more than success. It was proof that authenticity, determination, and vision have no borders. Through all of this, I never lost sight of the fire that had started it all, the ridicule, the laughter, and the doubt from him. I imagined him hearing about my global success and realizing that the woman he once dismissed had not only survived but thrived beyond imagination. Every product sold internationally, every media feature, every partnership was a quiet triumph, a testament to what can happen when determination meets opportunity. Challenges, of course, were far from over. Expanding globally required continuous problem solving, supply chain disruptions, unexpected financial hurdles, cultural miscommunications. Each obstacle tested my patience, my judgment, and my leadership. But each challenge reinforced my belief in my vision. I had learned early on that obstacles are not signs to stop but signals to strategize smarter, work harder, and persevere with unwavering focus. During this period, I also realized the power of storytelling. People weren't just buying products, they were buying a story, a journey, and an inspiration. Sharing my struggles, my failures, and my triumphs made my brand relatable, human, and aspirational. It connected with audiences in a way that pure business strategies could not. And with each story shared, my influence grew. My brand became a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and the possibility of turning doubt into fuel. As my business grew globally, recognition followed. Naturally, awards, features in international publications, and invitations to speak at major conferences became regular occurrences. Every accolade wasn't just a personal victory. It was proof that starting small, facing ridicule, and persevering with unwavering determination could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And then came the milestone I had once only dreamed of, the $1 billion valuation. The realization was surreal. Years of sleepless nights, sacrifices, and relentless effort had transformed a tiny, mocked idea into a global empire. I could finally say, not in arrogance, but in quiet pride, that I had achieved what he said I never could. I had not just built a business, I had created a legacy. I remember thinking back to the first day he mocked me, the first meeting where he laughed at my ambitions. That memory, once painful, now felt like a catalyst, a spark that had ignited everything. The ridicule, the doubt, the dismissive laughter had all fueled my determination. And now, standing on the threshold of global success, I realized that the very thing meant to break me had been transformed into the engine of my triumph. Through it all, my focus remained on growth, innovation, and empowerment. My brand wasn't just about products, it was about inspiring others, especially women, to pursue their dreams relentlessly. I knew that for every doubter, for every skeptic, there were countless people waiting for someone to show them that success is possible, and I had become that example. By the end of this chapter, I had not only achieved international recognition, but had also cemented my position as a visionary entrepreneur. My brand was thriving, my influence was expanding, and my journey from a small, underestimated businesswoman to $1 billion entrepreneur was now undeniable. And yes, he had noticed. He had seen the headlines, the media features, the awards, and the global reach. He had heard about the valuation, partnerships, the accolades. He may not have admitted it, but he knew deep down that the woman he had once mocked had surpassed everything he ever imagined. And while his recognition wasn't necessary for my success, it served as a quiet, satisfying confirmation that persistence, vision, and self-belief always prevail over doubt. By the time my brand reached the $1 billion mark, it was no longer just about business. It had become deeply personal. Every product, every store, every feature in the media was a reflection of years of perseverance, determination, and unwavering belief in myself. And I couldn't help but think back to him, the man who had laughed at my dreams, dismissed my ideas, and questioned my capabilities. The irony was sweet. He had once believed that I couldn't succeed, that my small business was a hobby, a cute little idea, destined to fail. And now here I was, a global entrepreneur, the founder of a brand worth billions, celebrated in international media, invited to speak at conferences, and admired by people around the world. Every success, every milestone was proof not just to him, but to myself that doubt can be conquered and ridicule can be transformed into fuel. Personal vindication, however, is not about revenge, it's about recognition of your own worth. I remember the first time I saw him at an industry event after my business had exploded. There was a pause, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by something unspoken, acknowledgement. He couldn't deny the reality of what I had achieved, and in that moment I realized that validation from others, even from those who once doubted you, is gratifying but not necessary. The real victory is the satisfaction of knowing you proved yourself through your actions, your persistence, and your vision. I walked into that event with confidence, aware of the journey I had undertaken. From late nights in my small apartment, working alone, to leading a global team, I had come a long way. Every obstacle, every sleepless night, every mistake, and every failure had contributed to the woman I had become. And the proof of that success was visible to everyone in the room, especially him. As I shared my story on stage later that evening, I noticed glances of recognition, respect, and even disbelief. People applauded not only my achievements but the story behind them. A woman underestimated, mocked, and doubted, rising above it all through sheer determination and hard work. I spoke about resilience, strategy, leadership, and the importance of believing in oneself. I spoke about turning ridicule into motivation, about using every no and every laugh as fuel for growth. And yes, I could see him listening. The man who had once dismissed my ambitions now witnessed their realization. There was no dramatic confrontation, no confrontation needed at all. The truth of my success spoke louder than words ever could. My growth, my brand, my influence, all of it was living proof of what dedication, vision, and persistence can achieve. But personal vindication wasn't limited to him noticing. It extended to all the people who had doubted me along the way. Friends, colleagues, investors, even strangers who had questioned whether a woman could succeed in a male-dominated industry. Each skeptical look, each doubtful comment, each dismissive word had once caused doubt to creep in. Now they served as reminders of how far I had come. Every one of those doubts had been transformed into a step forward, and now the results were undeniable. The most important part of this victory was internal. I finally felt the peace and pride that comes from knowing you did it on your terms. I hadn't compromised my values, I hadn't sought approval, and I hadn't cut corners. Every success was earned, every milestone deserved, and every achievement a testament to my resilience. The satisfaction wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of greatness. And yet, witnessing his silent acknowledgement brought a sense of closure. There was no need for confrontation, no need for gloating. I could see in his eyes that he realized the magnitude of what he had underestimated. And that realization, that quiet recognition of my power, was sweeter than any dramatic revenge. It was proof that success speaks louder than words, doubt, or mockery ever could. From this point forward, my life and business were defined not by his judgment, but by my vision. The fire that had started from ridicule had transformed into a steady, unshakable confidence. Every decision, every expansion, every innovation carried the weight of experience, knowledge, and unyielding self-belief. And I knew that my journey could inspire others, especially women, to pursue their dreams relentlessly, regardless of who doubted them or laughed at them along the way. Personal vindication, I realized, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about creating a life and a legacy that cannot be denied. And when the people who once mocked or doubted you finally see the truth of your achievement, it's a moment of quiet triumph, a victory that is as powerful emotionally as it is professionally. By the end of this chapter, I had achieved more than just business success. I had achieved self-respect, recognition, and the ultimate proof that perseverance and vision will always triumph over mockery and doubt. And while he could now see my success, it no longer defined me, my achievements defined me. The stage was set for the final parts of the story, consolidating my empire, inspiring others, and reflecting on how a single moment of mockery years ago had ignited a fire that would never go out. By now, my business had grown beyond anything I could have imagined when I first pitched an idea in that small office, facing his mockery. I had $1 billion brand, international recognition, and a team of talented professionals who believed in my vision. But success, I realized, is not just about numbers, profits, or awards. It's about impact, influence, and legacy. I began to focus on how my journey could inspire others. I wanted my story to show women, young entrepreneurs, and anyone facing doubt that adversity is not the end, it's the beginning. I started mentoring young businesswomen, offering guidance, support, and encouragement. I shared every lesson I had learned, the value of persistence, the importance of strategic thinking, and the power of turning criticism into fuel. I traveled to conferences, universities, and workshops, speaking about my journey. I talked about the nights I cried alone, the obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and the laughter of the man who once mocked me. I didn't speak to shame him. I spoke to empower others. I wanted every listener to understand that their dreams, no matter how small, could grow into something extraordinary if nurtured with patience, courage, and relentless effort. Mentoring became a source of personal fulfillment. I watched young entrepreneurs apply my advice, overcome their fears, and achieve milestones I once thought impossible. Their successes felt like extensions of my own, proof that sharing knowledge and experience amplifies impact. I realized that legacy is not just wealth or fame. It's the lives you touch, the inspiration you provide, and the doors you open for others. Meanwhile, my empire continued to grow. New product lines, collaborations with global brands, and expansions into emerging markets strengthened my influence. Every strategic decision, every new venture, was guided by the lessons of the past, careful planning, resilience, and an unwavering belief in my capabilities. I had learned that true leadership is not about control. It's about empowering others to share your vision and contribute to a larger purpose. And yes, he noticed, not in envy, not in confrontation, but in acknowledgement. People who had once doubted me began to recognize my influence and authority. It was clear I had transcended the narrow judgment of one person to become a global symbol of female empowerment and entrepreneurial success. Yet, legacy building wasn't just professional. I began to invest in social causes, programs for women entrepreneurs, and initiatives that supported underprivileged communities. I wanted my brand to represent more than profit. It should represent possibility. Every scholarship, every mentorship program, every charitable initiative was a way to give back, to ensure that others wouldn't face the same barriers I once did alone. The emotional satisfaction was profound. The laughter that once stung had long faded into memory, replaced by gratitude for the fire it sparked. I no longer defined my achievements by the disbelief of others, but by the tangible difference I could make in the world. And yet the subtle thrill remained, knowing that the man who once mocked me could now witness the lasting impact of what he had underestimated. Through mentoring, philanthropy, and global influence, I discovered that true success is measured not just by what you build for yourself, but by what you leave behind for others. My journey had evolved from proving myself to proving that anyone with courage, resilience, and vision could overcome doubt and achieve extraordinary success. By the end of this chapter, my legacy was no longer a personal victory. It had become a movement. Women and men alike were inspired to take risks, challenge assumptions, and dream bigger. My story had transcended ridicule, doubt, and mockery to become a living testament to the power of perseverance, vision, and self-belief. And as I stood looking at the global network of my brand, my employees, my partners, my mentees, and my inspired followers, I realized that the laughter of the past had been transformed into the foundation of a legacy that would endure far beyond any one person's opinion. By this point, my journey had come full circle. The small, scrappy business I had started in my apartment, mocked by a man who couldn't see my potential, had transformed into a global powerhouse. But growth and success weren't just about numbers anymore. They were about solidifying my brand, cementing my reputation, and claiming the recognition I had worked so tirelessly to earn. The process of consolidation was intense. I focused on strengthening operations across continents, streamlining logistics, and building a corporate culture that aligned with my vision. I wasn't just expanding for growth's sake, I was shaping a sustainable empire that could stand the test of time. Every decision, from hiring executives to launching new products, was made with precision and purpose. Public acclaim began to follow naturally. Media outlets, once skeptical of a woman running a business in a male-dominated industry, now sought my insights. I was invited to speak at international conferences, featured on business magazines, and interviewed by global networks. The story of a woman who had been laughed at, underestimated, and doubted, rising to build a billion-dollar brand, resonated with audiences everywhere. And yes, he noticed. By now, he couldn't ignore it. People would casually mention my achievements around him, sharing stories of my growth and recognition. There was no need for confrontation. My success had become public proof of my capabilities. The dismissive laughter that once hurt me had no power anymore. My achievements were tangible, celebrated, and undeniable. One particularly satisfying moment came during an award ceremony where I was recognized as one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the world. As I accepted the award, I thought back to the first time he mocked my ambitions. The irony wasn't lost on me. That moment of laughter, meant to discourage me, had been transformed into motivation that propelled me to global recognition. My speech that night wasn't just about my journey. It was about resilience, empowerment, and the power of believing in yourself. Beyond personal satisfaction, consolidation also meant solidifying my team, nurturing talent, and creating opportunities for others. I implemented mentorship programs, leadership initiatives, and growth paths within my company. The people around me became a reflection of the values I had worked so hard to uphold: determination, integrity, and vision. My success was no longer mine alone. It had become a shared achievement, a movement of inspiration for everyone involved. With every milestone, every award, every global feature, the narrative shifted. People no longer saw me as a small business owner trying to survive. They saw a visionary leader, an industry influencer, and a symbol of empowerment. And while the recognition was gratifying, it was the acknowledgement of my journey, the struggles, the ridicule, the perseverance that felt most meaningful. Through this phase, I learned an essential truth. Public acclaim is powerful, but it is most rewarding when it validates the journey, not just the outcome. Every challenge I had faced, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, all of it had led to this point. And seeing the world recognize that journey, while he quietly acknowledged it too, brought a profound sense of closure and triumph. By the end of Part 8, my empire was not just thriving. It was respected, admired, and recognized globally. The laughter, mockery, and doubt that had once defined my early days were now replaced by admiration, influence, and undeniable authority. I had transformed ridicule into a foundation for success, and every milestone, award, and public recognition was proof that perseverance and vision can overcome any doubt. And while he may have been forced to acknowledge my success externally, I knew the real victory was internal. the knowledge that I had built something extraordinary on my terms, that I had stayed true to my values, and that I had turned every obstacle into an opportunity. As my business empire solidified, I often found myself reflecting on the journey, the long nights, the failures, sacrifices, and yes, the mockery that had sparked it all. That laughter, once sharp and painful, had been transformed into a quiet, unstoppable force that pushed me forward when giving up would have been easier. Every setback, every doubt, every word of disbelief had become fuel for my determination. I remembered the early days vividly, sitting at my tiny kitchen table, planning my business with nothing but a dream and a handful of resources, while he looked at me skeptically and said, "It won't work." That moment, which once hurt so deeply, had become my motivator. I realized that sometimes the world's doubt is a gift in disguise. It forces you to dig deeper, to rise stronger, and to prove not to anyone else, but to yourself, that you are capable. Reflecting on the journey, I understood that my triumph wasn't just in the billions of dollars or the global recognition, though those were extraordinary milestones. My real victory was emotional and psychological, the satisfaction of knowing that I had refused to let ridicule define me. I had grown from a woman filled with uncertainty into a confident leader, capable of facing any challenge and committed to building a legacy that inspires others. And yet, the story of him, the man who had mocked me, remained a powerful symbol. He represented every doubt, every skeptic, and every obstacle I had encountered. But rather than resentment or anger, I felt a sense of peace and triumph. The satisfaction came not from revenge, but from witnessing the reality of my success, a reality he could no longer deny. The narrative had flipped, the underdog had risen, and the laughter that once stung had become a distant echo against the roar of my achievements. This reflection also reminded me of the importance of perseverance. Every setback I faced along the way, failed campaigns, financial struggles, lost clients and self-doubt had taught me lessons that no classroom ever could. I learned the value of patience, strategic thinking, adaptability, and courage. I learned that success is rarely linear, that growth is often messy, and that every challenge is an opportunity to refine your skills and strengthen your resolve. I also reflected on the ripple effect of my journey. My success wasn't isolated. It inspired employees, mentors, mentees, and aspiring entrepreneurs who saw in my story the proof that doubt and mockery can be transformed into extraordinary achievement. The brand I had built was not just a business. It was a movement, a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and possibility. Emotionally, I realized something profound. The greatest revenge is living well and succeeding beyond expectation. I didn't need to confront him directly or to gloat about my billion-dollar brand. My accomplishments, my influence, and my legacy spoke louder than words ever could. The laughter that had once diminished me had now fueled my rise, and my triumph was both personal and universal. Looking back, I felt gratitude for every challenge, for every doubter, and yes, even for him. Without that early ridicule, without the doubt he sowed, I might never have found the fire that propelled me toward greatness. It was a strange, beautiful irony. The very thing meant to break me had made me unstoppable. By the end of this reflective chapter, I could say with clarity, confidence, and pride that I had transformed every obstacle into opportunity. I had conquered doubt, defied ridicule, and turned ambition into reality. And the emotional triumph was complete. I had achieved not just external success, but internal validation, self-respect, and the knowledge that my journey could inspire others to rise above skepticism and achieve greatness. The moment had finally come. After years of relentless work, sleepless nights, and overcoming every doubt, my business had grown into a global empire. From the tiny apartment where it all began, to international offices, millions of customers, and $1 billion valuation, every step of the journey had led to this ultimate triumph. Standing in my office overlooking the city, I reflected on how far I had come. The laughter, the ridicule, and the dismissive words that once haunted me now felt like distant echoes. They had been the catalyst for a fire that could never be extinguished, a fire that had propelled me to heights I had once only dreamed of. And yes, he had noticed. The man who had mocked my ambitions, who had laughed at my small business idea, now faced the undeniable reality. The woman he had dismissed had built something extraordinary. He had seen my brand on global platforms, witnessed international media coverage, and heard my story shared at conferences and seminars. My success wasn't just evident, it was monumental, but triumph isn't about revenge, it's about proving your worth to yourself. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had persevered, that I had transformed doubt into determination, and that I had created a legacy, was far more fulfilling than any confrontation could ever be. Every milestone, the global expansion, the awards, the recognition, the billion-dollar valuation, was a testament to vision, resilience, and unshakable self-belief. The emotional pinnacle came when I addressed an audience at a major international entrepreneurship summit. Thousands of eyes were on me, listening as I shared my story. From a small business mocked by a naysayer to a global brand recognized around the world. I spoke about failures, setbacks, and the laughter that once stung, not to dwell on it, but to show how it could be transformed into motivation. I wanted everyone listening to feel the power of persistence, courage, and self-belief. The applause that followed wasn't just for the business I had built. It was for the journey itself, for the triumph over doubt, the empowerment of others, and the proof that no dream is too small, no obstacle insurmountable, and no voice of mockery more powerful than your own determination. And then I thought of him one last time, the man who had laughed at me, who had doubted me, who had dismissed my ideas. He could see everything now. But my victory didn't need his recognition. The billion-dollar brand, the international acclaim, the lives I had inspired, and the legacy I was building were proof enough. The laughter that once stung had been transformed into the foundation of my empire. Looking back, I realized that every challenge, every setback, and every doubter had been part of the journey that shaped me. Without them, I might not have discovered the strength, resilience, and vision that now defined me. And that realization was profoundly empowering. I had turned mockery into motivation, doubt into determination, and a small dream into a global legacy. The ultimate triumph wasn't just financial. It was emotional, psychological, and inspirational. I had proven that persistence beats doubt, vision beats mockery, and self-belief beats skepticism. The journey that began with ridicule had ended in empowerment, not just for me, but for everyone who believed in themselves despite the voices that said they couldn't. And as I stood on the balcony of my corporate headquarters, looking out at the city that had once seemed impossibly far away from my tiny kitchen table, I smiled. The story had come full circle. The woman he had laughed at was now a symbol of triumph, a beacon of resilience, and a living testament to the power of dreaming big. The journey from mockery to a billion-dollar legacy had been long, hard, and challenging, but it was worth every moment. And in the end, the greatest victory of all was not the wealth or recognition, but the knowledge that I had proven to myself and to the world that nothing is impossible when determination meets vision.